Well, I'm the executive director of Evanston CASE, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And Evanston CASE is an organization that it's a nonprofit that provides support and advocacy services for parents and caregivers whose children have disabilities. And the idea here is to provide folks with a community where they can engage with others who are going through similar experience, where they can get their questions answered about the special education system, which is extremely complex to navigate. So we offer monthly support groups where parents can get together with other people to talk about a whole variety of things. We also have an online private Facebook group only for parents and caregivers, and people tell me that they find that to be extremely valuable. It's like the only space that they can feel comfortable sharing anything, no stigma, no judgment. It's a safe space.
How many people are in your Facebook group?
There's about 515 at this stage.
And they're all Evanston?
Yes, only Evanston. Everything CASE does is for Evanston community.
And how old is the organization?
I founded it back in 2007. My son has a disability, and back years ago, I had difficulty navigating the special ed system and had difficulty in terms of feeling very isolated in the community. Generally you're dealing with a complex kid. It's difficult to get other people to understand that, and often to feel welcome and comfortable, and so there's a lot of isolation involved in that. And even though I'm a licensed clinical social worker, I had a really tough time getting what my son needed and understanding how the system works. And so after I was able to get him settled, I realized most people wouldn't have the information that they would need or the supports that they might need to navigate that system. And so I thought, I've got to do something about that. And that's how CASE was born.
You have the background, the educational background, you have the connections, and even with those things you felt completely overwhelmed and isolated. So other people, less fortunate, less educated, have a much harder time.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that is most important to me and important to our organization, is really being there for folks who may not have the resources that they would need in order to get the information and support and even advocacy service that can cost money that's difficult for people to access.
And are all your services and support groups, are they free?
The support groups are free. If a person comes in and meets with me directly to get advocacy consultation, then that's offered on a sliding scale. I also do many pro bono clients. It's important to me.
Give me some examples of case studies, for just something that can help somebody understand how they could come here and what the results are.
Sure. I can give you a couple of different examples. One actually is a program that we just got a grant for over the last year. It's called Empowering Parent Partners. And the idea was to pair caregivers who just wanted someone to go with them to their meeting and to support them and to help them prepare for the process and to have their questions in advance and kind of know what to expect. And the idea was that one of the things that's most difficult is you enter into a meeting like this and you're often by yourself, or maybe there's another person with you, and there are 9 or so people on the other side of the table. And it's not a level playing field, and it can be extremely overwhelming and stressful. And so the Parent Partner program is a free program that people can apply for, and we match them with people who have received some training from Evanston CASE, from me, and from the Moran Center for Youth Advocacy, and have experienced their own experience with their own children in the past. And at this stage, we've gotten just tremendous feedback from parents about what a difference it's made in their level of comfort and sense of what to do and what to expect, and that they could participate effectively in the conversation instead of feeling like everything was one direction process, right? So that's a little example, but it illustrates in general what CASE does for people, and that is to empower them with information and support so that they can do what they need to do for their children. And we do that basic thing through everything that we do. And really, probably, as I said before, the most powerful thing that we offer in the feedback that I get from people is a sense of community and place. These are everyone feels these are my people. Everything. So we don't make decisions about a particular disability, whether anyone can access what we have to offer here. But everything from an attention deficit disorder, ADHD, to learning disabilities, to autism spectrum disorders, to developmental disorders, physical disabilities, really the range. I would say the most common things probably are more the ADHD, learning disabilities, and autism spectrum are probably the largest numbers of people are dealing with that sort of thing. And the other thing is emotional disabilities, and that's something that I think people struggle the most with in terms of getting what their kids need at school.
And so are parents coming to you because their children have already been diagnosed and placed in special ed, or are you helping with the diagnosis and placement?
We're hoping to, often people will come to us because they've heard from other parents about, hey, you need to call CASE or join CASE so that you can find a space where you can get information. We're hoping and we're wanting to do a better job in engaging folks who don't already have an IEP, the individual education plan through special education, so that they can learn from others who've been through it, kind of what to expect. But even if you've been doing this for years with your child, there's always something new. Anyone is welcome who has a concern about their child and getting what they need at school for any reason. We see anybody from pre-K all the way through 21. And I find that really parents feel more comfortable when they hear something from another parent. That there's people will often post on the Facebook page, what do you know about this particular doctor or this particular service in some way, particular teacher or
Word
school.
of mouth.
Word of mouth is key.
Right.
It
From
is.
people who you respect
Very much so.
and identify with.
Very much so. And one of the services that's available for anyone who's interested in looking, as we do on our website, have a resources page. And so that's a place people can go to find doctors and psychiatrists and therapists and so on and so on. The issue is that in Evanston in general, both District 65 and 202, the high school district, in total there are about 1,500 kids in our community who have identified special needs and are receiving special education, identified disabilities and receiving special education, and many more who probably, who aren't on the radar, right? And so for us, we know for sure that we're engaged with about 650 or so families, and so we're missing a lot of people.
Do teachers and principals refer families to you?
They do. Yes, they do. I mean, it's been very interesting. At this stage, CASE is in a position where we are a resource for the school districts as well. That they both will turn to us for information, and they also are very receptive to anything that we offer in terms of recommendations or feedback about things that they're doing. And so, for example, in District 65, Dr. Gorin, the superintendent, has informed the community that there's going to be a new special education director, and has essentially told that person that she will be connecting with CASE and connecting with the Moran Center as a way to get a sense of what does the community need, what's the community's experience. And so they turn to us for that sort of thing.
You mentioned that a lot of kids may be unidentified, and maybe they're just considered problem kids, or
That's right.
And so how do you find those kids? How do you engage those parents?
I think that's one of the major things that we're focused on, is to do a better job in that way, and to figure out what is it that people want and need. Is it that they're not aware of us? Is it that we're not offering something that would be helpful? The thing that concerns me, and has for many years, is that there's inequity in the special ed system in terms of, what some would call resource hoarding. That the families with privilege and attorneys and so forth can, have more power, more leeway, more influence in getting things, and people who do not do not have the same experience. And that's why it's so important, in my view, for parents to have information, so that they can be more empowered and to be more influential in those meetings and in interactions with teachers or anybody who deals with their child at school. I worry a lot about the way in which Black and brown boys in particular are viewed in the school systems, in terms of if they're having any kind of challenges, it's viewed through a behavioral lens first, right? And that there is sort of a disciplinary reaction first, and that there may be, not a further investigation of what else might be going on. Does the student have a learning challenge? Is there an emotional challenge, or whatever else? One of the things that the Moran Center does, and one of their missions has to do with the fact that there's the school to prison pipeline, right? And so when you have kids that are pigeonholed in a certain way because of behavior, that there's data that shows even from third grade that puts them at risk, right? And that so many kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system are kids who have either unidentified disabilities or underserved in this way. And so it's extremely concerning to us as an organization, and we would like very much to understand what it is that we can do to be available, to provide what's needed, and to get that sort of feedback from folks. It's important.
A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, they called the police resource officer on a 6-year-old kid.
Yes. And how is it that if a child has had interactions with police officers in their community or others who have, and there's a sense that these are not necessarily safe people, that having a person be responsible for calming a student who's in uniform like that is just it just makes no sense. It really doesn't. And so generally, I'm sure these are kind and caring people. They want to do the right thing, they want to be helpful, but their training guides them in a certain way, right? Anybody in their right mind would say that was wrong. Yeah. Our whole point here is to create a community that reflects the community of Evanston. That's the whole point. It is not about privilege and not, right? Because the system everyone has to navigate. It does not matter what your particular circumstances. We all have to navigate it, right? And so there shouldn't be a situation where some are more equipped than others. There's just no reason for it.
Tell me what you do. If somebody has a child with attention deficit disorder, give me an example of what's happening.
Right. I think that if it's a situation where kids are being treated punitively, or that their behaviors that are related to their disability, related to impulsivity, right? If those things are treated as behavior problem, then they're missing the point, right? And so if a parent is having an experience in which their kid is getting in trouble a lot, that the school is calling them a lot, that the teacher's complaining that the student is misbehaving, is lazy, is non-compliant, all of those in my mind are red flags, right? Because kids, their behavior is communication. Okay, and so it isn't about being reactive to behavior, it's about understanding it. So that's where all those other layers come into play. So that's one of the primary problems that we see, is when there is a misunderstanding or lack of understanding on the part of the teachers and staff about what the child is presenting when they come to school. Same with a learning disability. There are some kids, I mean, if you can imagine, looking around and feeling like other kids are getting something more easily than you are, and the frustration that would create for you, and the ways in which you might express that discomfort, whether it's I'm not doing that work, or I'm walking out of the classroom, or I know if I behave in a certain way, I'm going to get to go home, right? That there needs to be an understanding of where the behavior is coming from. It can't just be assumptions about race or assumptions about, income or anything else. It should be what is driving, what is the child trying to communicate, right? The other is often when a student is behind, when parents get these test scores and they're very confusing and hard to understand, and they're like, what does this mean anyway? What does it really mean about my kid? And when should I be concerned? If it looks like my child is a year, 2 years behind other kids, well, what's going on there, right? And it isn't just about, it isn't about the school making assumptions around lack of enrichment or lack of, things at home that can help promote, development and education. There needs to be a sense, and it's hard for parents to get to a place where they're going to say, I'm worried about my child and I think you should evaluate them to see why. Why are they behind? I think it's a scary thing for parents to do, and many people want to resist that idea.
And most of the time when a child has has issues at school, do you find that it's mostly the parents who initiate eventually to talk to teachers and the principal, or do you find that it's teachers and principals who reach out?
I think it's more often the former, because I think the schools are overwhelmed. I think that they react to the squeaky wheel, right? And, unless it's a situation where they feel like they really just absolutely cannot educate the child for whatever reason, and it's really serious or whatever, I think certainly there are circumstances where they'll reach out and say, I really think we ought to take a look at this. But I think, in my experience, the vast majority is the flip side. It's about parents asking. It's about parents being concerned and bringing it up. And that's why it's so important for parents to know how to do that.
The more privilege you have, and the more income you have, and the more free time you have as a parent, the easier it is for you to access and have the courage to address it or to talk to people. The less you have of that, if you don't speak the language, if you have 5 jobs, if you yourself have a substance abuse issue, whatever it is.
If you're single parenting, I see that a lot with single parenting, and how hard it is to juggle all those things, to get to the school for a meeting when you're trying to work, when you have multiple kids or whatever it is, and that the schools are not always as accommodating as they should be, and yet they scratch their heads and say, well, why aren't these parents more engaged, right? Without really an understanding of what are the barriers.
Another big issue is the parents aren't comfortable going to the schools. A lot of the parents themselves went to these same schools and didn't feel good at them.
Right.
So
there's a lot of history that people don't understand. I, myself included, I'm sure there's a whole lot that I don't know, a whole lot. And that's why it's so dangerous to make assumptions about people. The more that people make an effort to reach out, to understand, to have maybe uncomfortable conversations, to not be afraid to do that. It's hard. But I think that, when it comes to educating our children, there's so many things that are complex about it, and that require understanding and require information to be able to appropriately educate a child, to provide them with what they need. And so, really, in my view, this particular area of navigating the special ed system, either when you're in it or when maybe you think you should be, how to do all of that, it's a very complicated area of the law, very specialized. There are many, many rights that parents have that they don't know that they have. And so these things are, are critical for people to have a sense, to have some awareness about it at a minimum. Right? Several times a year we offer workshops, and usually at the library. But anyone who would call and then say, I want you to come visit our parent meeting or our community group or our church or whatever it is, I'll go wherever. So.
How do you think in general Evanston schools do in the case of special ed?
It's interesting. They're better than Chicago. There may be some North Shore suburbs that do a better job. I think we have a wide range of needs in this community, and our school system is big as compared to like a Wilmette or some other place. It's big. A lot of kids, a lot of schools, a lot of staff, and that the schools tend to operate kind of as individual schools, and they do things their way, and so there can be inconsistencies in the different schools in terms of how well kids are served, for sure. So I wouldn't say that that Evanston is terrible, right?
There's not a shining beacon.
But I wouldn't say that, and yet they could be. And I think that's another piece of what we do as an organization is we try to be a watchdog, and we try to push for improvements, and we try to give them feedback when we think they're not doing something right.
Do you ever go and do presentations to teachers?
We would like to. It's something that we've have said that we're available to do. The district at this stage hasn't taken us up on that, but we do share information all the time with them. And in terms of sort of the origins of CASE, we were initially about advocating for policy, advocating for compliance with the law in the school systems. That was the thing we were doing, and over the years we've expanded to do much more support and direct teaching and advocacy for parents, being very much focused on parents and families. But we haven't abandoned that piece in terms of working to improve the system, because ultimately you can help one parent at a time, one family at a time, but if everyone's being impacted by an overall system problem, you have to deal with that.
Give me an example of when it reaches the point that an attorney is needed.
I think if you're talking about a student needing perhaps another placement in a therapeutic school, if they're needing a service that the district has just plain said they're not going to provide, if the family is in need, for example, there's if there's a situation where a student is behind many grade levels, then a parent has a right to ask the school district to pay for what would be called compensatory education, meaning the district would pay for private tutoring, specialized intervention, and that is the sort of thing that can take an attorney to do. It's these things that become a cost. If there's a financial cost to the district that's significant, then that's often where attorneys are needed. Again, for us, it's really largely about our educating the community that we're here. We have work to do. I guess the other thing I would mention is that we also are engaged with the city of Evanston, that they've turned to us to help them with looking at how to make their summer camps more inclusive, and sort of getting our feedback about where the breakdown is. The difficulty is that you, again, have parents who are privileged, who can afford to pay for private camps, specialized camps that may have, that may address a particular disability even, and people who are reliant on the city services, right? And so if you need to use city summer camp and your child has a special need in which they really should have someone with them, someone who's got their eyes on them and who understands what that child needs in order to be successful at camp. Those things are critical, right? So we've we've engaged with the city in discussions about how they can make improvements in that way. I think having an understanding of where the breakdown is at camps, I think, has helped them to kind of think about it a little bit differently and So I'm hoping that people will tell me this summer that it's better. I'm hoping that parents are going to have a better experience. We'll see.
And what about your survey? Like, when did it go out and when is it coming back?
It should be going out Monday. And what we're looking for right now is feedback from the people who are most important to us, right? Parents, caregivers, guardians, so that we can find out, do they know who we are? Have they used any of our services? Is there anything that they need that we are not providing for them? And with the whole idea being so that we can make sure that we focus our resources in the right way. But again, one of the challenges for me is trying to get that to people who aren't already engaged with us, and that those are the people that I want to hear from the most. I see it as something that's going to take time, and even if we were to be able to get a handful of people who could give us feedback, it would be enormously helpful. If people want more information about us to just check things out, go to the website www.evanstoncase.org. They can sign up to receive our newsletter, and we put that out periodically. It's usually once a month, sometimes more often. It's always about issues related to the school system in Evanston and about any kind of information that we think would be helpful or of interest to people. We have a phone number if people want to call and ask me questions, 847-556-8676.
Okay.